morning, North Carolina Conference of Branches. Good morning. Let's give it up for our own version of Mahalia and all of the other people. Gracious and eternal God, we know that whenever you call us to do anything in your name, you take the risk of putting treasure in trash. Treasure in an earthen vessel, broken, weak, frail vessel. But you do it that the excellency of the power might be of you and not of us. So hide this state conference. Yes, Lord. Every local president, every executive member on the state and the local, the national level. Hide our regional director. Hide us all under your cross. Please, Lord. Cover us all in your blood. Yes. And to this jar of clay, grant thy spirit, that somehow lips of clay might speak words of life. In Christ's name, amen. Amen. It's good to be here this morning, to see all of you. Thank you so much, Sister Coleman, for being such a mentor to me and such a role model. And when you talk about strength, she always talking about I go, but I'm telling you, nobody goes more than Carolyn Q. Coleman. She is such an inspiration, and to all of the members of the State Executive Committee, as I often say, and I said this morning, sometimes being president is like being a coach of a bunch of superstars who all in their own right have so much to offer to the cause of justice. And I want to thank you and tell all of you how much I love you and how much it means to work together, whether it's the state vice presidents and Brother Courtney and Reverend Spearman and Sister Carolyn, or whether it's our district directors, our local president, our secretary, treasurer, all of you, every one of us, every member. Power of this organization is that we are grassroots. That's right. Power of this organization has been that we do this out of the volunteerness of our heart, believing in the power of God to make a difference. As I come here this morning, I want to take one moment of personal privilege and ask our prayers for Jerry McCombs. He lost his father. He sent me a text. We've been in prayer with him. I was out of town. And yesterday, despite having gone through that grief and it's immediate to him, it's still present, he walked up and said, I had to be at the convention. He's one of our great district directors, and I want to take a moment. Thank God for my family. I don't always get a chance to introduce them for different reasons, and I thank God for them being here. Two of my sons, and the other one, I think he was at the Shady Shack last night. I think, Carolyn, that's where he was. I'm not quite sure. I know they went out. He thinks he can hang with his dad, but I keep telling him he got my name, but I haven't taught him everything yet. It's good to be in the house this morning. Paul said in the 10th chapter of the book of Hebrews, the 39th verse through the 11th chapter, we are not of those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I want to talk some this morning about because we know who we are, we shall not be moved. We are not of those who shrink back unto destruction. This scripture that I just quoted is said to have been a favorite of Dr. King and many others in the movement who have been a part of the great movement for justice down through the corridors of history. You know, somebody did this before us, and we stand in a great tradition. Men and women did this before us. Black and white and Latino and Native American, gay and straight, did this before us. The text calls us to consistently be mindful of who we are. In fact, it suggests that the one thing you cannot do in a justice battle is become schizophrenic and lose your sense of self. Was it not on the ancient pyramids long before Socrates laid claim to it? Know thyself. In the face of oppression and opposition that will always attempt to redefine you, for the first goal of opposition is to make you think you are less than who you are. And so anytime we're going to pursue a goal, we must know who we are. When the Apostle Paul first quoted these words, he was speaking to people in the New Testament. In fact, all of the New Testament was written to people under pressure. All right. It wasn't written to people hiding out in sanctuaries. That's right. It was written to people who were facing enormous political, social opposition driven by government officials who had committed themselves to extremism and domination rather than the exemplary and noble cause of deliverance. So when you read the New Testament, you are reading letters to people under pressure. The people in Hebrews had committed themselves to justice over against those who had committed themselves to injustice. They had committed themselves to going forward over against those who had committed themselves to go backwards, but they were getting tired. All right. You read the earlier part of the book of Hebrews, some of them were thinking about going back. Some of them were saying, why is it that we have to do this in where we are right now? Why is it that we have to keep going through this? When are we going to have final victory? And it is into this historical, social, and political space that Paul said to the faithful, some of whom are deeply hurt and deeply disappointed, he says, yes, there is still pressure. Yes, there is still opposition. Yes, you've gone through so much and seen so much and accomplished so much, but don't ever forget who you are. Don't engage in historical amnesia. Remember that you, no matter how hard it gets, you are not of those who shrink back or fall back unto destruction. We are, in fact, those who have been called to persevere. We are the ones who must stay and remain steadfast in the cause of justice. We are the ones who must walk by faith and not by sight. I would suggest this morning, Reverend Spearman, that this call sounded by Paul nearly 2,000 years ago still echoes and summons us together today. And the truth still remains, and that for us in the NAACP, for us in the moral community, for us in the great company of justice and freedom fighters, when we know who we are, when we understand whose we are, then we understand why we must declare that in our fight, while there is blood running warm through our veins and breath in our body, when it comes to what is right and what is moral and what is just for all people, because of who we are, we shall not be moved. Say that with me. We shall not be moved. And we send this over to all who are watching this around the country and others by streaming. As we gather this morning in the 70th State Convention of the State Conference of branches of the NAACP, in the home region of George Henry White, the last African American to serve in the U.S. Congress from North Carolina until in the 1990s, another Eastern girl, Eva Clayton. But it was George White in his exit who said, I might leave now. Might be trouble now. You may have changed the rules now. My Lord. But like the phoenix, we will rise from the ashes. Brother Matthews, we're in a great tradition. Now let us reflect for a moment on the fact to know who we are, that when this state conference was born in 1943, the armed services of the United States had not yet been integrated. Come on, sir, come on. 1943, the Plessy principle of separate but equal and the principle of legal segregation and discrimination was still the law of the land. When this state conference was born, there was no Voting Rights Act. There were no Civil Rights Act. And yet with faith and hope, and because they knew that they were born to change this country, they stood on the principle that they would not be moved. They sung, lift every voice and sing. With the words and the melodies in their heart, they sang a song full of the faith that the dark past had taught us, and full of the hope that the present had brought. They took home the odds. I'm talking about 1943. They had courage. 1943. They refused to wallow in despair before 20 years before Dr. King ever called us to not wallow in despair. Despite being jailed in this state, despite being hounded and hunted and beaten. I often hear folk talk about how progressive North Carolina has always been. Not so. Not so. You better read the history. You better read. It was in this state that the former president of this state conference had his house blown up. It was in this state that the lawyer that led the effort for desegregation had his car blown up one night outside of a meeting. He went out and saw the car on fire, and the people said, what are you going to do? He said, well, it's blown up now. And they went right back in the meeting and kept working toward justice. Despite being beaten and hung, with boldness they refused to be moved. And by faith and works, they were determined to build a new world. I cannot help be reminded of the history of this state conference. Sometimes I tremble at it, Carolyn. Bus Spearman, Courtney. See, I'm your child. I'm not your contemporary. That's right. I'm what y'all produced. Amen. See, I'm your baby boy. Hallelujah. All y'all in here that are over 70, I'm your child. I'm the one you corrected. I'm the one you patted on the head. You see, and I thank God for you. And every now and then, I tremble to stand in this place. I read history, and I remember when the state conference a few years ago, Dr. Tyson, we were in Wilmington, and he lifted footnotes and records from the past during a membership luncheon. Anybody remember that? He told us about how 70 years ago In 1943, segregation was the law of the land in North Carolina. Buses, parks, schools, libraries, hospitals, theaters, county fairs, restaurants, hotels, water fountains, public restrooms, and cemeteries. That's right. Now that's sure enough segregation. When you can't even die together. We're all segregated in North Carolina. Courtrooms in this state kept one Bible marked colored, 1943, and another Bible marked white in this state. Many registrars, especially in state rural county, refused to register African American. That in 1943, according to the footnotes, was one of the worst years in American race relations. In 1943, 70 years ago, in this state conference, in this nation, there were 242 major racial clashes in 47 cities, from Detroit to Los Angeles and Mobile and Dumont, and they were all modeled off of what happened in Wilmington in 1898. There were riots in 1943 in this state, again in Durham and in Wilmington. There was lethal violence in Concord and in Charlotte, Brother McCoy. After a Durham bus driver in 43 was shot, Private Booker T. Spicely, he died and for refusing to move to the back of the bus in Durham. And Pauli Murray wrote in this, "Is this the brand of democracy we are asked to die for? In the South, a khaki uniform and a brown face are open invitations to cold-blooded murder." Langston Hughes wrote in 1943, "You tell me that Hitler is a mighty bad man, but he must have took his lessons from the Ku Klux Klan." And yet, even in the face of the Ku Klux Klan and terror in North Carolina and ruthless caste system, the North Carolina State Conference of Branches, NAACP State Conference of Branches, persisted in grassroots organizing. During World War II, the number of NAACP branches in this state more than doubled, and the statewide membership swelled to nearly 10,000. Touch your neighbor and say, we have work to do just to catch up with what they did back then. There was a firebrand named Lewis Austin, the editor of the Carolina Times in Durham. He published a weekly wartime platform that demanded an end to discrimination, high wages for domestic workers, and the employment of Negro policemen in 1943. In 1943, black teachers in Durham, led by the NAACP, pressed for salary equalization with white teachers. Roy Wilkins at the national office, according to one footnote, said, "Negroes are organizing all over North Carolina to secure their rights, and they are not frightened." I said 1943. Ella Baker, a Shaw University graduate who grew up on her grandfather's farm in Halifax County, became the national director of branches in 1943. All right. Ella Baker, right down this way. Baker served as a midwife at the birth of the North Carolina State Conference of Branches. And on September 24th, the state NAACP branch president met at Friendship Baptist Church in Charlotte, where Baker had spoken 5 days earlier to a packed house, calling for every citizen in Charlotte to enlist with the NAACP in the fight for the extension of democracy. The NAACP leaders like T.V. Magnum of Statesville, branch president, Kelly Alexander Sr. of Charlotte, and Vice President N.L. Gregg of Greensboro as treasurer, and Mrs. H.H. Love of Asheville as secretary, and J. Francis Price of Raleigh as the chair of the board. By the end of 1945, North Carolina boasted 50 branches. The new state conference declared to the branches in 1944 that the groundwork is being laid so that the organization could successfully champion the cause of the Negro in a post-World War. And under the leadership of the executive committee and the president and the branches, the North Carolina NAACP from 1943 on up into the 60s, on up until the time that Ms. Coleman was executive director, filed more lawsuits than any other state conference in this country. during the post-war era. I cannot help but be reminded of this history. Not only of what's in the footnotes, but when I find myself in conversation with those like Al McShirley and Miss Coleman and Courtney Patterson and Carolyn McDougall and Reverend Spearman and Herb Joyner and Kojo Nantumbu and Miss Rosanelle Eaton and so many others of you in this room, when I just listen to you, I'm reminded of this history. Reminded of the way over which we have come through violence, through hurt, through setbacks, through storms, how we have come as a movement, not just as black people, but how we have come as a movement dedicated to the principles of equality and justice, and how we have always had, at every period in history, we've always had to engage in the intestinal fortitude of resistance against any effort to move us backwards. But not only historically and biblically is this 70th year important. We are in this convention in the 70th year, and we need to be reminded that in numerology of the Bible, 70 was a time of newness. 70, a multiple of 7 and 10, represents a time of completion and perfection and new beginnings. Was it not in the Bible that they declared that when Jacob and his family came to Egypt to be saved by a mighty deliverance of God, it was 70 family members? That's right, 70. Is it not recorded in the 70th division of Psalm, make haste, O God, to deliver me. Make haste to help me, O Lord. Let them be ashamed and confounded that seek after my soul. Let them be turned backwards and put to confusion that desire my heart and my hurt. That's the 70th division of Psalm. It was on the threshold of beginning the deliverance from Babylonian captivity and oppression in the 70th year that the prophet Isaiah was inspired to write, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings as eagles. They shall run and not get weary. They shall walk and not faint. 70th year. Yes, sir. We talk about the 12 disciples of Jesus, but the Bible says in the Gospel of Luke that when Jesus really went to work, he sent out 70 to heal and cast out devils and stand for liberation. Was it not Jesus that said, how many times ought you forgive somebody and have a new beginning? 70 times 70. 70 is a special time also for us contemporarily, because we are in the middle of a mighty movement. Rabbi Goodman said it the other day. He said, we're in a red letter day. Yeah. Mark it on your calendar. Go ahead. And I must tell you that as a son of 63, born 2 days after the March on Washington, I have been personally inspired by moral movement, Monday movement, and you all like never before. Who would have thought that on April 29th, 17 of us would go in, 7 clergy, 10 citizens, representing the great tapestry and diversity of our state and nation, and we would engage in a moral act of civil disobedience over against extreme and immoral actions of the current state legislature, and a movement would be born. Who would have thought that not at 13 weeks later, 941 courageous souls who would have thought that following the banner of the NAACP, white people and black people and Native Americans and Asian in the South? You want to know how powerful this movement is? This movement is so powerful, and I don't mind saying it on the internet, that I went to Dare County and slept in that white lady's bed. Oh, have mercy. You know that's a movement. You talking about a movement? And not only did I go to her house and eat her food and go in her kitchen, and she let me go in her refrigerator, she introduced me to my cousin that I didn't know that's a master chef. I'm telling you, there's a movement going on. And the 941, we didn't represent ourselves. We represented the cries and the concerns of all those who care about justice. Who We represent those who dare to say in word and deed that the actions of this current General Assembly, the actions of the governor of our state at this time, they are constitutionally inconsistent and morally indefensible and economically insane. Thanks to the courageous Moral Monday participant, we have begun, thanks to him, we've begun the critical task of taking the Bible and other sacred writings back from those who use it and heretically abuse the Bible. Thanks to all of our NAACP warriors who threw their families and themselves directly into the major struggles that we raised. 13 Moral Mondays in Raleigh, several Witness Wednesdays, 13 simultaneous rallies on the afternoon of August the 28th, the actual 50th year anniversary, where we all walked in unity, and thousands of people from Silver to Boone to Lincolnton to Concord to Charlotte to Winston-Salem to Greensboro to Chapel Hill to Raleigh to Wilmington to Greenville to Dunn to Elizabeth City stood up and said, "We shall not be moved." Never. We must do our ancestors proud. We certainly can do no less than they did. We must do more. Never before in the history of South have 1,000 people been arrested for civil disobedience at a state capitol in the South. Never before have there been 13 rallies, integrated, representing the citizenry, all happening on one day. Yes, we went to the march on Washington in D.C., but in North Carolina, we did what Dr. King said. He said, go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. And your moral courage has given hope to hundreds of thousands of North Carolinians. Our regional director is here this morning, and he's meeting with folk who are talking about having Moral Monday in Georgia. Last night I got a text or email from Reverend Kojo. There's a group talking about one in Alabama. The Daily Tar Heel called and said, can you tell us about the Moral Monday breaking out in New York City? You have put a spotlight on injustice in this nation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I am delighted to report this morning that the spotlight is so bright, and thanks to 2 or 3 of the lawyers, Ms. Kapoor is here, I believe Brother Scott and David Neal were lawyers tomorrow, who have volunteered pro bono to represent 941 people who were arrested. I'm here today to report that the light of Moral Monday is so bright that a district court judge threw out the charges against throughout all 3 counts against 2 of our arrestees. And now the courts are in contradiction with themselves. They ruled guilty in Al McShirley's case, maybe because the brother had a Muslim name. But then on yesterday, they had to face some different people. And now the courts are in contradiction from themselves, because did not the Lord say that if you stand and fight, he said, I'll cause confusion. We know who we are and why we can't be moved. Now, every October since I was elected to serve as your president, it is required that I give a report on the state of civil rights in North Carolina. And although the extremists who rammed through the most destructive legislation since the days of outright Jim Crow, when we organized the state conference, are operating. And I'm sure that some of them are still celebrating their achievement, they think, to strip us of our civil rights. But this morning, because of you, because you've allowed your son to walk in your midst and be inspired by your courage, I come to announce, after having traveled the width and breadth of this state, been in the legislature, been in the rooms, that no person, no faction built on the foundation of scapegoating the vulnerable of their human rights will last long. The celebration of our opponents is muted and off-key. The Moral Monday movement is clear and harmonious. The state of civil rights movement in North Carolina, I'm proud to report, the state is, we have declared, we shall not be moved. And because we shall not be moved, let me lay out for the media and others and our delegates business that we have decided at this state conference. In the area of voter suppression, 21 million estimated votes cast in North Carolina over the past 12 years. The number of claims of fraud were 5 out of 20 million, and none of them would have been stopped by so-called ID. 500,000 estimated number of people in North Carolina who may not have a current NC driver's license, and over 317,000 who've already voted who do not have what this new law is calling for. 22% of the currently active North Carolina voters who are African Americans. African Americans use same-day register or early voting somewhere in the neighborhood of 70%. We understand what's going on. In 2012, 22% of registered voters were black, 32% of those who used same-day registration were black, and over 29% of those, used early voting. In light of these facts, the aim of the North Carolina NAACP is to have the monster voter suppression bill, which Governor McCrory signed in July, to be stricken from the books by the courts before November election 2014. And if the courts move slower than that, our goal and our fight will be that at least by 2016, we will end this monster voter list. This is a fight we must fight and we must win. Additionally, we will be educating people all across the state on the racist intent of this law, rammed through the legislature. We will continue to build a multiracial, multi-ethnic electorate all over North Carolina and the South. Our legal team will guide us in how to engage in voter registration and voter education as the case is being pushed through the courts. When the federal court meets and the hearings are held, we will fill the courtrooms so that the judges and the law can see that we shall not be moved. And we don't intend to take one step back. The federal suit calls for restoring pre-clearance restriction for all 100 counties, not just the 40 that were presently covered by Section 4. So in a strange way, God has fixed it that what they meant for evil. Y'all didn't hear what I said. You see, before they started messing, only 40 counties were covered under Section 5. Then they went extreme. They engaged in racialized public policy. And they got us mad. We sued. Then the Attorney General looked at it. Now he's suing. But now, rather than saying there will be 40 counties in North Carolina, he's calling for all 100 to be covered in North Carolina. What they meant for evil, God is working to good. Ask the person to just turn the mic up just a little bit. Number 2, in an article a year ago or so, it was reported, and has been further substantiated, that Art Pope, our state's budget director, has spent upwards of $40 million over the years to support regressive and extreme policy development and candidates in light of this, and his actions now as budget director. Before, he was just a citizen. And many citizens give money, both sides. But now the kingmaker decided to come in and work for the king. He came into an office that is sworn to uphold the Constitution. He's the budget officer for North Carolina. His fingerprints are all over the budget. And now we can draw a line from the investment of his money to the bad public policy to the money being taken out of your pocket. And so in light of this morning, this state conference passed a resolution that gives the state conference the power to work with our national board of directors to engage in a campaign to expose the links between the state budget director, Art Polk, his financial propaganda, and backing of right-wing Tea Party ideologues. Coming from one of our local branches to this convention, we are now going to be asking the National to work with us in developing informational pickets.
Yes.
We will look at his work, his budget that attacks teachers, public workers, the poor, minorities, the sick, the out of work students, while giving tax breaks to 23 of the wealthiest families in our state. We will look at his work as budget director, and we'll study carefully and the debts, the legislators who have profited from his financial help. Groups like Civitas and others. We will look at that. And we will do informational pickets that will be planned at stores that he owned, that he says of his own admittance he puts in poor communities. And so during the shopping season, we will not boycott, but we will have informational pickets and letting people know what's going on with the money that they spend there. In public education, we've seen the worst cuts ever by this legislature. Some reports say that North Carolina is now 50th in terms of per pupil spending, teacher salaries. Thousands of teachers and assistant teachers are going to be fired. $10 million they took from public schools to give to private schools that have no restraints against resegregation. Many of our children could not go, and plus that's not what our Constitution said.
That's right.
In light of this, we are announcing that we will work with educational rights groups and other civil rights groups to file lawsuits challenging the deep cuts that the legislature and Governor McCory, along with Governor McCory, have made to our public education system in North Carolina. McCory, Berger, and Tillis have set out to deconstruct and defund North Carolina's highly respected public school system and university. They want to take us backwards. On this past Sunday, even Doonesbury, the most respected political satire cartoon in the nation, brought back memories of Senator Jesse Ham. And they called North Carolina and the policy that's going on the policies of no. No to our children. No to our future. No to those who are hurting. But we are going to say yes to a constitutional principle that was put in the Constitution 145 years ago by blacks and whites, which our Constitution says this simply: in this state, every child has a constitutional right to a sound basic quality education. And we will take on anybody in court that tries to undermine that principle. Number 3, within a few weeks of the extremists taking over power in our General Assembly, one of their first acts by Governor McCory, Berger, and Tiller that was to pass and sign 2 bills that spit in the face of every poor and working family in this state, regardless of color, party, or geography. This is not about black folk. This is about just hurting people. That's right. Although the federal funds were readily available for extending unemployment insurance, which workers had paid their share as a part of the fruit of their labor, this extremist legislature, with Governor McCory's quick approval, rejected the funds and cut them off. June 30th, 70,000 people lost their unemployment. And tomorrow, Monday, the first person I met that had lost it was a white man who lost his job and no fault of his own. A factory, he had cancer, was trying to pay his house bill. He didn't know how he would survive after June 30th. There's something mean, y'all. That's right. When you kick people when they're down. Yeah. North Carolina has had the 5th highest unemployment in this country. This particular legislature has promised to build jobs and has done more to undermine jobs than any legislature or governor before. It's wrong to kick people while they're down. That's right. It's wrong to take people's basic subsistence. And then when you add to that the fact that the governor then pays enormous salaries to inexperienced political appointees while he snatches unemployment payments. That's right. out of the mouths of workers. And then it came out just the other day in the newspaper that now they're approving a $200,000 in toilet repairs at the government mansion. Huh? If I wasn't a preacher, I'd say that's a bunch of crap, but since I'm a preacher. This is cold, y'all. It's mean. He said when he did this, sometimes you have to do some things are necessary evil. And I said, Governor, evil is never necessary. It's a choice. It's a decision. This kind of extremism is directly against the poor of our state. Then on top of that, the governor and the legislature in the first 2 weeks of this legislative season rejected available federal Medicaid money for health insurance to more than 500,000 poor families. Touch your neighbor and say, poor families. That means they rejected it for some Republicans and some Democrats and some white and some black and some young. You know, Medicare even cares for children that have disabilities and hearing problems and the blind. And just like the attack on jobless families, the stripping of medical insurance for the poor goes into effect on January 1st, 2014. Happy New Year.
My God.
Governor McCory and Speaker Tillis and Senator Berger's New Year is to say Happy New Year to 500,000 poor people. Amen. By denying them of health care. Happy New Year. Like those in the United States Congress that have shut down the government rather than support the Affordable Care Act, which would begin the difficult process of providing decent health care for all, Governor McCory and Tillis and Berger have lined up with those. And they are now trying to shut down justice, and shut down compassion, and shut down caring. So in the face of this, we did work in this convention, and we stand upon the principle, as we stand on the precipice of a great human disaster.
Yes, sir.
December 31st comes and goes, and there is no outcry, there is no change. 100,000 more people will lose their unemployment. 500,000 people will be denied access to Medicaid. And some analysts say nearly 2,000 people a year will die. So as we approach the season of redemption, clergy who met on Thursday said we're going to call upon the governor to reconvene the legislature.
That's right. That's right.
Call on him to rescind these draconian laws. He can do that.
Yes.
If the legislature doesn't join him, he can use his bully pulpit to say it's time to do what's right. Faith leaders at this convention have written a letter to the governor that we're working on completing, that will be circulated online and otherwise through the Forward Together Moral movement. We're going to get as many signatures as possible within the next few weeks. And then we're going to ask the governor to call not just a special session, but a special redemption session. To rescind these two anti-family, anti-children, anti-poor people pieces of policies that were driven through in the early weeks of 2013. And we're going to call on them to do it by December 20th. I think that baby that they always want to celebrate has something to do with redemption. I think somebody ought to say to leaders, you got to decide whether you're going to be on the side of Jesus or the side of Herod. It's time out for cute claims of allegiance to the Christ while you're killing the very people that Christ died for. And so we're calling for him by the 20th. And then, but on the 23rd, it's going to be tomorrow Monday at the state capitol. And either we're going to be there on the 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, to celebrate a season of redemption in North Carolina, or either we're going to be there to continue to protest. To protest what has in fact gone on And that in the season of Christmas, our government has chosen to live in hypocrisy. But one way or the other, on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, we'll be having Maul Monday. Jews and Christians and Muslim and brothers and sisters alike, because we will not allow our brothers and sisters to be crucified without a witness. We will not. We will not. We know who we are. We know what that book says. Our deepest constitutional values said we hold it to be self-evident that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, the enjoyment of the fruit of their own labor, and the pursuit of happiness. That's in our Constitution in this state. All government power is supposed to be used for the good of the whole. That's in our Constitution in this state. Equal protection under the law is in our Constitution in this state. And if man's law isn't good enough, I know what God's law also says. God's law says, woe unto those who rob the poor of their right and legislate evil. Isaiah 10. God's law says if you want to be a repairer of the breach, you got to take care of the poor and remove the bands of wickedness. God's law says when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick, did you come see about me? When I was thirsty, did you give me drink? There's God's law. Then finally, we've been building People's Assembly and gathering every February. This past year, 17,000. But this year, in light of the extremism, we're announcing today we will be sending out an all-points bulletin to our new and old friends in the state and out of the state. If you got family in North Carolina, we want you to march on Raleigh with us on February the 8th. If you care about North Carolina, we want you to march on Raleigh on February the 8th. If you understand that as North Carolina goes, so goes the nation, so goes the South. If you want to change the South, you got to change the nation, you got to change the South. You want to change the South, you got to change North Carolina and put it back in the right place. Come on down to North Carolina. We're sending out the call, just like Dr. King said, come to Selma in 1965. We're saying come to Raleigh in 2014. You believe in good jobs, come to Raleigh. You believe in good labor rights, come to Raleigh. You believe in good schools for all, come to Raleigh. You believe in good housing, come to Raleigh. You believe in good health, come to Raleigh. You believe in good voting rights, come to Raleigh. If you believe that it's right to do right all the time and right now, come to Raleigh. So my friends, like those before us, we are declaring by faith, because we know who we are, that we shall not be moved. We are the children of faith, the children of commitment. We are those who believe in freedom and therefore cannot rest. We demand that our state not forget its promise made in its Constitution. We demand that we not relinquish the hope that North Carolina be a state where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. We know we're in the South, the crucible of change, where hope has always had to be chiseled from the stone of despair. We understand that North Carolina is ground zero and the nation is looking at us. We will set the tone for how we move forward as a country in the days to come. Because as the South goes, so goes the nation. This, my friends, is no small moment. This is a big moment. Our protest and our fight is no mere emotional hyperventilation. It's not driven simply by partisan allegiances. We are committed to the principles of what is moral and what is just and what the Lord requires. And don't we know what the Lord requires? Of every nation, of every state, of every people,
Yeah.
Seemed like I remember him saying, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly before his God. Seemed like I hear Amos, that peasant farmer, whispering in my ear, saying, tell him let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. We know what the Lord said. We know what he says. So we are not confused. We're not schizophrenic. We are quite clear. We're clothed in our right mind. We know who we are. We believe, God help me here, that we've been born for this moment. Anybody that thought that difficulties would depress us, better look again. Anybody who thought that opposition would overwhelm us, better look again. Anybody that thought a fight would frustrate us, better look again. Any politician that thought his or her puny power would make us pitiful, run scared, and go home, better look again. Anybody who thought a jail cell would make us jump back, better look again. Anybody who thought calling us names would make us quit, better look again. We know who we are. Yes, God. And we are not those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. And now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. We walk by faith. We believe that faith itself is the victory. For the Bible said, it is your faith that is the victory. I'm sorry, I just got to be me. There is a story about a little girl and a father who went on a sailing expedition, and the boat capsized way out in the water, and the father had to make a decision. He could swim to shore, Brother Carl, and get help, or he could stay with his daughter and drown, because he could not swim with her on his back. And so he said to his little girl, do you trust me? Do you know I'm your daddy? Do you know I'm your father? And she said, Daddy, I have no reason to doubt you. He said, well, I need you to lie on your back in the floating position. I'm going to swim to shore and get help, but I need you to float on your back no matter how the waves roll. I need you to float on your back no matter if the wind comes. I need you to float on your back. I love you, but I got to go away for a little while, but I'm coming back. Just stay here, baby. And she turned on her back. She was floating, bobbing like a buoy in the ocean, up and down, winds rolling, picked up a little bit. Father swam to shore. Took him several hours, finally got word to the Coast Guard, got on their boat, went back toward the place that the nautical instrument said she would be. While they were approaching, the captain spied in his binoculars a figure bobbing on the water. The winds had picked up a little bit, Andre, and the waters were a little turbulent. He told one of the members of the crew, you be ready now to hold the father, because I'm sure that she's dead. And when we get there, he sees his baby dead. He's going to lose it. So as they began to get there, they cut the engine motors so that she would not get caught up in the turbulence. When the motors ended, they heard what sounded like singing. The closer they got, and they saw that little girl was singing some of the nursery rhymes that her father had sung to her on the many nights he put her to bed. And when they grabbed her out of the water, the captain was so moved that once they covered her with blankets to protect her from being cold and losing her body heat, and they began to warm her up, the captain went over. Said, little girl, I never seen nothing like this. How is it? Did you lay on your back? Never turn over. All It's dark out here. You stayed on your back. The water is rippling. You stayed on your back. The wind is blowing. You stayed on your back. And she said, oh, Mr. Captain, it was easy. My Father, he loves me. And my Father said he would be back for me. And I've learned that my Father keeps his word. So I had faith in what my Father says. Let it be known to North Carolina and to those in the nation who are trying to take us backwards and oppose the children and the descendants of freedom fighters. We walk by faith and not by sight. We know what the Father said. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And faith talks to us when we're on the stormy sea. Faith says 1 can chase 1,000 and 2 can put 10,000 to flight. Do I have a witness? Faith says, the Lord is my light, my salvation. Whom shall I be afraid? Faith says, Pharaoh is no match for the Lord. Goliath is no match for the Lord. Slavery is no match for the Lord. Jim Crow is no match for the Lord. Modern day reincarnation of injustice is no match for the Lord. Because faith says, is anything too hard for the Lord? He's the same yesterday, day and tomorrow, no matter how dark it gets. Faith says, weeping may endure for a night. Two bodies may endure for a night. McCory may endure for a night. Legislature may endure for a night. But joy comes in the morning. Faith says, I might have some dark Fridays. Faith says, might get bad some Fridays, but hang in there. The story ain't over. Sunday morning, we'll get up. Resurrection always wins. Justice always wins. Love always wins. Courage always wins. So how we going? We're forward by faith. We're living by faith. We're breathing faith. We're marching faith. We're praising God with faith because we know who we are. Faith is the substance. Things hoped for. The evidence. Things not seen. And we've come this far. Touch your neighbor and say, this far. Touch another neighbor and say, I've come this far. He brought me this far.